there's slightly linked to the luck. There's a very high amount of persistence and resilience which is needed, and that's because sometimes you just get unlucky, and you can go out to lots and lots of funders, and it's either the time of the year, or it's just that there's not enough funds going around, or that there are some fundamental problems with your proposition or your pitch. So having the resilience to carry on, having the persistence to be able to say, I'm going to look at things differently, change my approach, that's really important. And that's, I think, what defines a successful fundraise versus an unsuccessful one is, an unsuccessful one, you generally see people just deflate and then step away rather than persisting. I think kind of connected to that as well as awareness. So having the awareness to know that when feedback is coming into you, you're responding to feedback, good and bad. And then being able to change your tactic, to be able to shift and adjust, to be able to do that. I mean, we've got a fundraise on at the moment for a company we're working with, and they wanted to go out to £350,000. I've found out that the market isn't ready for them, so they've decided to bank on 200, carry on with what they've got, show more traction, show more proof points, and then go out to a new fundraise later on. So there has to be some awareness to what you're doing in your pitch, and that kind of resilience to change.
And I want to add to that, the meaning of resilience really is to be able to endure pain without permanent injury. And that's what funders need to develop. And the sense of awareness that you have for yourself actually helps you a lot when you transfer it to the funder, to the investor side, to build resilience. Because if you stop and actually understand what's going on in the head of the investors, you might understand that 90% of the time they tell you no for reasons that have nothing to do with you. And that should help build your resilience somehow. And the rest 10% really goes back to bringing it back to your pitch deck, bringing it back to your plan, understanding if there is something you can do better. So it actually helps to go to your least favorite investors first and see if you can help you get the game up to when you're ready to pitch to the big guns. So, and when I ask you about that, you spoke a lot about resilience. You jumped in with that word immediately, relationship. Thank you. So tell us a little bit more, attributes for relationship and what you meant.
Well, my background is mostly as a professional investor for 12 years. So I was running a 500 million euro fund across Europe and the US. And so I've seen maybe 2,000 pitches from entrepreneurs. So the typical thing that an entrepreneur does that annoys investors is they treat it as a one-shot pitch to get money. And from the investor's point of view, I'm trying to figure out whether I'm going to bet my career on your business. So I'm only making one new investment per year. And my decision is it you or is it somebody else? And is it in digital health or is it in enterprise software? I mean, I've got a zillion choices about what to invest in. And so in building the relationship with your investor, it's going to take multiple meetings. And the main thing that's going to count at the end of the day is your character as an entrepreneur. And so if I was going to pick two things that you can build as attributes, one you're completely in control of, which is your listening skills and ability to take on board the feedback that you're getting from investors, because in the first meeting I'm going to tell you something, and in the third meeting I'm going to check up whether you did any of that stuff and whether you believed me or not, because I don't want to work with a company where you're not interested in my opinions. I'll go and do something where my input's more useful. And then perhaps the second thing, which you're completely in control of, is your own leadership ability. And leadership is largely about the maturity of your character and how realistic you are about what you can do and what you can't do and what you need to build with the team, what you need to build with other people. So if I had to pick one attribute, I would pick listening.
Yeah, very good. And I want to echo one thing that you said, accountability. And I say it from the shoes of an investor now, but I've been on the shoes of a CEO before as well. If you say you're going to send me an email, if you say you're going to send me a reference, do that. Accountability is measured even in the very small promises that are made during the first interactions and then carried on over time. And another one that I think is useful for everyone, but especially to the women CEOs, and I apologize that you're not being represented in the panel, trust me, you can do it. It's authenticity. So own your weaknesses, because this is a very long-term marriage. And so if you don't do it from the very beginning, we're going to smell it. And we're going to ask yourself, okay, who are we entering into a relationship with? And if we cannot answer that question very clearly, we're actually going to shy away. So I'll add those two to the attributes of a funders, authenticity and accountability. And now maybe I want to get a little bit more into the action. So you've come to the Zen zone, you've built your attributes, you're ready to do this, you're ready to enter into a long-term relationship. What do investors want you hear? You're at the pitch. What do they want to hear? Starting from you. Yes.
Well, I should ask you this question, but as a founder, several things, of course, it's not just one answer to your question, but I think there is also one very important thing is growth, right? Whatever that means. If you are generating revenue, if you are generating clinical evidence, if you are generating whatever you are generating, whatever your main KPI, I think investors, correct me if I'm wrong, investors want to see real growth, meaning month over month, not year over year, but month over month, double digit if possible somehow, but growth.
Yeah, growth at speed. I like that you pointed out the timeline is important. Of course, we want to see a progression, but we also have a fund with an expiration date on it. So we'd like to see that there is momentum carrying on from month to month. You go.
So I think we'd spoken previously before this meeting about exits. So it's the dirty word slightly when you're fundraising, because it's a really hard thing to describe when you're in the shoes of a founder, where you're going out for your first seed round or even a pre-seed round, to even be able to see towards what am I going to do to give this person their money back, particularly in digital health where exits have been challenging. And I think I only really started to realize this when I stepped across the line, went from founder to investor. You start to look at things a little bit differently. So I think it really depends on the stage that you're at. So if you're at a very early stage, making too much of a big deal about exits is actually probably a bad idea, because it all feels very ethereal, it feels very far in the future. But have a very clear vision in the mind about what that might look like, particularly if you're going to your big rounds, if you're going to your Series Bs and higher. You need to start thinking about where is it that this person is going to get their return from, because they have something that they need to give back to their own LPs or investors in the fund. They need to be able to articulate that in a way which is succinct, and so you've got to really understand what is it the investor is needing from me, and that could be that you want to go for something very ambitious. You want to do an IPO and you think you can get there, and then show the pattern to get there, show the growth that's going to allow it to happen, but really core focus down on what the metrics are to get you there. And I think that's the bit which everyone always misses, is, I'm going to IPO because it's happened with 5 other companies in my sector. Well, but what are you going to do? What's the specific thing that you're going to do to make sure that happens? So I think that's very important.
Yeah, and I take that and I expand on it. Terrific point, exit. As I said, we have funds with an expiration date, so at some point we need to see that. And on that note, it helps if you're a CEO who's just about to start fundraising, go to the library, pick up the book on how VC works, and read it, and get in the shoes of the VC in front of you to understand what the constraints of his business are. You might actually find out that you don't need venture capital money. You can find money other ways, and that's fine.
So I think investors are really looking for 2 things. So one I would call the future state vision about how this business would be. I mean, you're in the business of transformation of some sort. So if you don't have a clear view about where you want to be in 5 years' time, nobody else will have it for you. It's yours. And I want to hear what it is. I'm not going to give it to you. That's not my job. And then the other thing that I'm thinking about, which is a bit of a dirty thing to talk about, is money. So I'm looking for a certain amount of greed in my entrepreneur. And I've got an equation in my mind, which is roughly speaking, I'm going to deploy 10 million euros. I want to get 30 million euros back. I'm going to start with 20% of the business. I'm going to get diluted by 5% along the way, and I'm going to exit with 15%. So how am I going to make my 30 million? And what I'm looking for from the entrepreneur is, quotes, the number. And so it might happen over dinner, it might happen in very informal settings, but I'm trying to calibrate your level of ambition for the business. What's a serious exit for you? So if you're a first-time entrepreneur, I can't think of the number of people who've come back and said, I expect to exit this business for 15 million euros. It's never going to work with venture capital. It's got to be more like 100 or 150, and maybe you want to be more ambitious than that. But I'm trying to find out in a realistic way what your number is while you're off guard, while you're thinking about what you really feel. Yeah. That's the heart of the equation for me.
Very well said. And I'm going to come back to something you said. You challenged me to say what I would like to hear in pitches. So for me, the key words are risk, capital, allocation. I mean, I think about the relationship of you running the company as the relationship of you balancing risk and cash. Cash that you put in the company and cash that you spend to mitigate risks. So when you come to me, I hope that you're going to tell me a story for how you put resources to work to mitigate what risks in the past. Give me a list. This is the risk that I'm going to de-risk in the next 2-3 years. And this is how I'm going to use the cash towards that. And you start peeling the onion of risks of your company until you get to a nucleus, which is something very solid that is going to return the money to investors. So peel the onion for me, talk about risk and capital allocation. And then quick round just to keep the fun going. Signs that you do not want to work with a venture capital investor. Take one. Go first.
Obsession with downside protection is a good reason not to work with somebody, I think.
Okay, that's a good one.
Depends on the stage, but if you're kind of earlier, I would say if an investor is saying to you that they just want to be hands-off, then you're not getting someone strategic. You're not getting somebody that's going to help you move forward. And it can sometimes be very scary saying no to capital. But you want to acquire the parts of your business that you can't yet fulfill because you don't have the money. You don't have too much of the money. So if an investor is saying to you very heavily that they just want to give you some cash and walk away, sometimes that can be very useful for you. But my personal view on that is some of my best proponents have been people that have wanted to be strategically involved in the business moving forward.
It depends on the moment, but I would say along the process, my personal opinion is long agreements, long contracts are complicated to deal with. Yeah, right. As a founder, as a CEO, it's you have a lot of things to do, especially thinking on growth, resilience, relationship, blah blah blah. And whenever you start talking with an investor with a very very long contract, it's a complicated moment, I would say.
Thank you for that. We're not going to name names, so we're going to move on and not say who our not favorite investors are. So I want to get to tactics maybe and make this conversation a little bit more actionable on things that you can do. So just how does the process go? Can you email VCs directly? Do you need an introduction? I want to get to very practical things that you do to secure and nurture that relationship with an investor. Very tactical.
I think in Europe, having an introduction from somebody is really helpful. You can email people directly, but then their first question is going to be, well, who are you and where do you sit in the ecosystem? What have you done before? So I think a warm introduction is a very helpful thing to do. And then I think you want to probably have a qualification call in Europe because we're not geographically very centralized, so you end up having a call with somebody just to prove that you're a serious person, that the plan has legs. And then the first meeting. So I think if you get a first meeting, that's the sort of heart of where you're starting to make some progress. Something I think is really worth understanding from an entrepreneur's perspective is that you feel that when you have a term sheet from an investor, you've won. That's it. And the investor feels like when he's put a term sheet out, that's the beginning. So you just pass some filter to get to the term sheet, and now his work begins. And now you're in for 2 months of hell while he decides whether he really wants to do this deal or not, whereas you feel like you've got the money already and all we've got to do is get the lawyers to do some work. But it's not like that. There's a massive mismatch of expectations when you sign a term sheet.
Whoa, that's heavy.
In my fund, your fund is completely different. Sure.
You're the nice guys. So let's spice it up. Tell me actually tactics that did not work. Dispel one myth for us. Tactics that do not work. Or at least did not for you.
Well, for me, what doesn't work is aggressive selling. So yes, it's a sales job, but no, don't try and close me in the first meeting.
Very nicely said. So you go.
So something that didn't work recently for a portfolio company of ours was they're fairly naive entrepreneurs, and we're sending kind of daily emails to the investors that we were talking to. And when I had a look at the communications, I was able to say to them, the reason you're getting no luck from this is because you're pissing them off, basically. You're annoying them constantly. So stop annoying them, and you'll probably get a better response, or you can go out to other investors. So that focus, being prepared, the tactics that we generally use, we we'd spend a lot of time up front working out the materials that you're going to have available to you when you were going into a pitch discussion. We have a kind of front-ended deck that will be sent out straight away because that's your pitch, that's your door opener, but having a much larger bank of information that sits behind that, that when an investor then opens up that conversation and says, I want to know more about X, I want to know more about distribution, you have the 5 slides that are ready about distribution that you can send straight away. You look slick, you look like you've got your act together, you look like you're prepared. And I think that really helps to be able to give a good kind of image of the company and then take you forward into another conversation. I think the point on a term sheet is really important. Getting your lead very quickly is something which always really helps. Having somebody to advocate for you who is from the investment community, who's already signed up to a term sheet, has already committed capital, going into those conversations with committed capital is a great tactic. And then the third thing that's worked really well for us recently, we got a jump of valuation for one of our companies that we were working for just by signing some letters of engagement from various different industry partners to distribute the product. So it showed that they were ready to move. As soon as the capital is committed, these guys are ready to distribute, they're ready to go forward, and they're ready to launch. So having some kind of notes of sale or letters of engagement, something from your customer base that says, I trust in this product, that's really, really helpful tactic to be able to leverage investors quite quickly.
Yeah, tactics is also something complex, but I think, and taking the ideas they mentioned, I think it's a sales process, so don't expect to close the deal on the first meeting. And that's related to the relationship, right? Build up that relationship. Go where they are, whether that's this event, I know, having a beer in a bar, whatever. Build that relationship with the investor because it's about trust. They're going to give you money. They barely know you, so build that relationship so they have confidence in you. And that relationship is not just about the round, right? It's about human relationships. It's about talking about your kids, your wife, whatever you want to talk, and build that trust, right? That's so first thing. Second thing is get ready. I mean, get ready and focus, and that's related, right? You cannot get ready on everything you are doing, finances, product, sales, clinical development, blah, blah, blah. What's your strategy? What's your main KPI? And get ready to demonstrate that you are growing that KPI, right? Have the document ready. And whenever they email you, answer as fast as possible with a small document. You don't need, actually, you better don't send 50 pages to an investor. 1-2 slides in a PowerPoint document, focus on that metric, on that question, and to do that fast, you need to get ready before you talk to them, right? So.
All these fancy VCs bragging about the books that they read, and then you suck a deck that's 20 slides too long, and oh, that's too long, I get my associate to read it. So I'll add to the tactics one thing, write it down. Anything. If you are in a meeting and things are being discussed with your venture capitalist, write down the important things and follow up on that. If you're in a meeting and you get a verbal commitment, we're in, and these are the conditions, get back into the car, don't even wait to have your computer, just type in your phone and email to the investor that says, this is what I understood, and write it down. They tend to forget. They are a very funny breed. I want to talk about something that we have not talked about. When it comes to tactics, how do you leverage the rest of the team? I mean, fundraising is not a solo job. So I want to talk about, as a tactic, how do you take advantage of the rest of your team, your advisors, anything else? You want to go first?
Well, I think you're looking, the entrepreneur, the CEO of the company needs to be fielding the whole team, not in the first meeting probably, but they gain a lot of respect for their leadership skills if they have the confidence to delegate the revenue earning questions to the sales manager or the head of sales, the financial accounting questions to the finance director or the interim finance director, who it is. So you look much more confident as an entrepreneur if you trust your team to deliver the results that the investors team's looking for. If you don't do that, then I mean, it can be good if it looks like you're totally in control of your business, but it looks like you're lacking in confidence a little, I think, if you never introduce your team to the process. But it is quite risky because your team's going to be kind of leaky and not on message some of the time, and so the investor's going to find out what the reality of your business is. But they're probably going to find that out anyway in a month of getting to know you, at least they're intending to.
So it's a hard question because every entrepreneur, every business is not going to be able to have everybody that they need and constantly. So and everyone that they need to be able to go out and raise funds. So there's got to be some way of being able to balance the fact that with cash-strapped startups, you're not always going to have all the expertise. So how do you gain that? The best way most people do it is by getting advisors. You saw one of mine on the screen behind you just a minute ago, my mother, who's our chair of our board. And so bringing people like her to those kind of meetings always really helps because we're three young guys who have got decent careers behind us, but we don't have necessarily that kind of expertise backbone of 30 years of working in the sector. And so using the people that have some of that expertise and have gained that expertise over a long period of time is also very helpful in the investment room itself. So showing that you have the maturity to say where you have gaps is also very, very helpful with investors. It generates trust because investors themselves, while they're a very strange breed, they understand as well that not everything is going to be there in that startup every time. They've been in the game long enough, and them themselves are, in a very funny way, entrepreneurs, because raising a fund is not that much different to going out and raising your rounds of capital, to be honest. So they are entrepreneurs in and of themselves, so they really do understand that. Having the skill gaps very, very clearly defined as well, so that you know what you're going to go out for after the round is also very important. So knowing whether the problem you've got is a technical problem or whether it's a product problem. Do you need a product innovation manager or do you need a CTO? That's going to help you define your technology roadmap. Those kinds of questions and answering those things up front and being very clear about them, being very, very almost dogmatic about who the right people are to do those roles is actually very, very helpful moving into the room, because you can defer some of those questions off investors into your next rounds of cash.
It goes back to authenticity. It's not just being authentic about yourself as a CEO, but authentic about what your company is all about. And then risk capital allocation. These are my weaknesses, and this is how your capital is going to help me de-risk those.
The other day we were talking about trust, relationship, get ready, documents, blah, blah.
Well, good stuff.
So you need a team, right? You need a team and you need how to manage that with the team. And in my case, and that's just personal experience, that was a very, very, I think it was one of the most complicated things to do in a company for me, the team, and not just for the fundraising process, but also for the daily stuff, right? For me, it was very, very difficult. And I think it's key, right? Without the team, you don't go anywhere, because you cannot start having beers or building that trust with investors without no one taking care of the office and having sales, clinical, whatever, right? So it's not, I don't think it's a matter of how do you leverage or how do you use your team or collaborate with your team. It's for the fundraising. That's the daily stuff of a founder, right? Team relationship, building the team, trust with the team as well, and having confidence on them, what they prepare for you, etc. So I don't think that's a question for the fundraising process. I think that's a question for every day.
Very well said. And it's for the everyday also knowing how to manage your advisors and use them. And now that I am on the investor side, I really appreciate when CEOs, as part of their tactics, understand when to bring in those external resources that are their advisors. Truly experts that I understand I cannot phone every other day. Those have committed just a very limited time to the company, and so if I suck it up completely as an investor doing due diligence when I'm not yet serious about this opportunity, well, it's not nice. It's not very polite. But if I'm asking you a scientific question, if there's something that goes really, really deep, I want an answer, a very good answer, and I really appreciate it at the right time to hear. And if you want to, I can connect you with my advisor, which is one of the key opinion leaders on this matter. And by the time I get really serious about a company and I'm in due diligence, there is about 15 people around me that are looking at this opportunity, experts that are part of my team, experts that I trust and I consult confidentially in order to understand if something that I'm seeing makes sense. So, if you have an independent expert in your pocket as a funder and you want to say, yes, I connect you with this scientific advisor of mine, they also know an expert who is in no way incentivized to tell you good things about my company, and I can probably manage to get you on a phone call with them. Kind of powerful. It tells a lot about who you are as a funder and the kind of resources that you can mobilize and the confidence that you have that what you are trying to sell is good. Now we're down to just a very few minutes, and there was something that I said before, I joking that VCs love their books. I love my books. And I wanted to ask you all, your favorite book, Twitter handle, Medium account, I don't care if it's a comics book, what reference you want to give to funders who are just starting out that they can read and digest, and for you it's the single best resource that you can advise?
I'm going to give you two things. I'm going to give you one that's very technical, which is Tom Tungus's personal blog site and the template that he has for raising capital on Redpoint Capital, which is like the Bible of how to build a subscription-based business. So if you don't know the answers to that, then the investor's going to accuse you of not understanding how your unit economic model works. It's very technical, but you have to be on top of it. And the other thing I would point to would be books about leadership. So if you want an easy book to read, I would read Why Should Anyone Be Led By You, which was written by Gareth Jones and Robert Goffey, which is a very readable book about leadership, improving your own leadership skills. And if you wanted to read something very academic about leadership, then read Mastering Leadership by, I think it's Bob Anderson and Bill Adams, which is kind of the definitive textbook about leadership right now.
I'm also going to say two, because I couldn't really pick between the two. So the first is one of my favorite female founders, heads of a fund, a lady called Priya Guha, who runs Meriden in the UK, invests almost solely in female founders. She has a wealth of knowledge in that brain. So anything she writes in any forum, whether it's the Independent or her own Twitter, follow it, and lots of actionable examples of companies and founders that you can learn from. So she told me about the 1% rule that was applied in Salesforce recently, which we've started implementing in our own business, which is 1% of all of our profits going back into the communities we serve, and hopefully one day 1% will be a lot of money. So I think that's the first one. The second one, there's a lady called Leha Gupta, who lehagupta.com is her website. She's created an app called Greener, and I think what she's done very cleverly is detailed the journey to get to where she is right now on the website, taking a human-centered design approach, doing it very, very well, defining the personas, getting deep down, doing the research, showing pictures of her standing outside Waitrose with clipboards, speaking to her customers, and then ending with her pitch deck. And then being able to see the pitch deck and seeing how absolutely fantastic this journey has been to get them there. Most investors will find it very hard to say no, having seen that process, I think. So I think it's a very good example of showing your journey in a very innovative way and then ending it with a very clear ask.
In a few seconds, Xavier.
Just one book, The Pillars of Earth.
Okay.
That's not related to investment, that's not related, but just a novel, random book. Read something out of your business, because you need to end the day in a good manner and start the day in a...
Out of the box, I like that. I dig it. So I'll give you mine. It's my go-to resource. It's The Monk and the Riddle. Yes, it's not surprise. It's by Commissar, and I recommend it because it's a genuine story of authenticity in the venture capital and startup world, and it speaks of a relationship, and so it will surface some of the sentiments and the attributes that we have talked about this morning. And 20 seconds late, we end this panel, thanking you all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.